All right, folks, I'm going to do a short little video here, well, shortish by my standards, single-digit numbers. That I guess, I've been meaning to do this for a while, but Simon Crane did it a couple of weeks ago, and I thought I'd continue the conversation, so to speak, among... I like it when some of the watch pundits and YouTubers have shared topics of conversation. It's kind of interesting when it brings a little bit more resonance to the different channels and keeps it's like a conversation going. Oh, you hear that? Silence. No music for this one. Anyways, no reason for it. Just didn't put anything on. What I was going to do is a 5 favorite brands video, and I'll do this in segments. So I'll talk about each one in order, in reverse order, and then I'll show you some pictures of some of my favorite watches. Not all of my favorites, but just some of my favorite watches among each brand. You'll notice, I'll say this preemptively, that there aren't any real haute horology brands mentioned among the 5. I'll give an honorable mentions at the end, which will include some of the higher end brands, but I feel like I don't own any tier 6 or higher watches. There are some brands I really like, but for the most part, I might do a video on this at some point, but for the most part, I think that my stylistic preferences are more centered around tier 3 to 5, meaning the video would be about how different tiers almost have different stylistic qualities. And for the most part, I'm not crazy about the styles, the look of tier 6 and 7 watches. There are some exceptions, of course, but it's just not, I like more of the diver sport look. And most of those are really high-end, very complicated dress watches. Anyways, number 5. Number 5 is Oris. That's right, Oris. Oris is a brand that mainly makes tier 3 watches. I think their retail prices range from around $1,000, maybe a little bit less, to, I think their highest end pieces are like 4,000-ish or so, unless they have limited edition ones. Oris, as our dear friend Archie, I have a little bit of there's some allergies in the air, so pardon me for being a little sniffly. Oris, as our dear friend Archie says, doesn't try to be anything other than what they are. They're a quality, mid-range, entry-level luxury brand. I think what stands out is they have this really distinct Oresian style, especially with their dive watches, the Diver's Day, the Aquis, the Pro Diver, etc. Just they really have a unique look that I really find appealing. I've owned 2 Orises in my life. One I only owned for a short time, the Aquis. I just wasn't wearing it. I liked it a lot, but I didn't love it. And then, of course, I have this one, which I plan on selling. I do really like this watch a lot, but it just, it served its purpose. It had its day, and I'm not wearing it pretty much since I got the Electric Blue Seamaster, which was over a year and a half ago. This has just kind of been sitting around. I would wear it every once in a while, but anyways, yeah, Oris is number 5. Let's take a look at some pictures. All right, the number 4 is what we could call the other Japanese brand, also known as Citizen. Citizen makes the Miyota movements, so they make, which is kind of the equivalent, the Japanese equivalent of ETA, meaning it's a generic movement that is used in a lot of brands. It's often considered lesser than the ETA, but that's partially because it's Swiss. I think it's cheaper to service, which is nice. They also make lower end Miyota movements than they make than ETA movements. But anyways, that aside, that's not what I like about Citizen. Citizen makes a lot of good watches in that lower tier 3 range, the $500 to $900 range. Watches like this, the Signature line, really interesting, unique designs, great design work on the case. A lot of them are eco drives, so you're almost getting a higher quality case because you're getting a solar powered quartz movement. Eco drive technology is a little different, but I don't know the specifics well enough to really talk about it. But yeah, the Grand Touring, the Signature series, there's some dive watches. There's some really nice watches in that series. They make some good tier 2 watches, and I believe they have a line called Campanola, which is their higher end pieces, and I think they're more tier 4. But yeah, Citizen, they're a little tighter than Seiko as far as they don't have quite the diversity, at least in this country, or at least what I've seen online. But they have I think they're almost like, it's almost like they're less diverse than Seiko, but the overall quality level is a little nicer. It's just that the floor is a little, Seiko does a wide range of lower end pieces. Citizen doesn't do as many real lower end pieces. They're more upper tier 2, tier 3 is their focus. So Citizen, they just make really quality, nice pieces. Let's take a look at some of their watches. All right, finally number 3, Seiko. Yes, that's right, Seiko. Seiko, as you might have seen in a previous video, was my nomination for the best watch brand, and the criteria I was focusing on was that they make something for everybody. And I think in a way Seiko, as I think I said in that video, if we had to get rid of all watch brands except for one, I'd almost say Seiko, because there's no other watch brand that makes something for everybody, that makes such a diversity of watches. Now, some people take issue with that because that means that they make a lot of lower quality watches, but even their lower quality watches are decent. They're good for what they are. Seiko has a line of great dive watches, which I'll show you some of in just a moment. They have higher end lines like Grand Seiko, Credor, Galante. They have some interesting technologies like Spring Drive, and they just make quality timepieces in a huge array of styles. I only have the one Seiko right now, and Seiko was a lot bigger in my world a couple years ago. And this one I'm going to sell because I just don't wear it. I really like it, but and part of me wants to sell everything and just keep this, because it's just such a solid. If I could only have one watch under $300, this might be it. The Seiko Black Monster. Anyways, this is the second generation. I will eventually get myself a Seiko Marine Master. It's just a matter of time. But I would like to get a higher. The most I've never owned anything beyond a Seiko Sumo, which is a really nice, one of the best watches you can get for under $500. But my tastes have kind of gone for more expensive things. So the obvious next step would be either a Marine Master 300 meters or the higher end Spring Drive Marine Master 600 meters. But that's another story. So yes, Seiko is my third favorite brand, and let's take a look at some Seikos. All right, number two. I'm sure you all know what number 1 is, right? I'm very obvious about that. I mentioned it in the last video about best watch brands. But number 2 is Breitling. Okay, Breitling is my second favorite watch brand. I'll say something first of all about what I don't like about Breitling, and that is that most of their watches are high polished metal. I'm not crazy about high polished watches. I much prefer brushed or matte, a softer look. I'm not really into the bead blasted on the other extreme. I like the combination of polish and brush, and this is one of the reasons I got, as I said in one video, this Blackbird, which is my current reigning favorite watch. The Blackbird has a nice balance, has some high polish, but it also has some brush, so it really balances out really well. And this one also, this Crosswind Racing, is also mainly brushed. Actually, this might be entirely brushed for one or two spots. But, you know, Breitling, you always know a Breitling. Breitling has a very distinct look, like all the high-end brands, but some more than others. I don't think no one's really making homages of Breitling as far as I can tell, other than the Navitimer. But the Crosswind Racing, the Chronomat series, which has that very distinct bracelet. The Avenger uses a similar bezel. There's the Steelfish, Super Ocean I'm not as into. And then, of course, the Navitimer, one of the classic sports watches. If you were somebody that wanted to just have iconic sport watches, I think what you'd want is a Rolex Submariner, a Blancpain 50 Fathoms, an Omega Moonwatch, or possibly Seamaster, and a Breitling Navitimer. Those would be your iconic sports watches. But yeah, so Breitling is my second favorite brand, and I will show you some pictures right now. Okay, finally, number one. Yes, my number one favorite brand is, of course, Romega. That's right, Omega. As you all know and suspect, it is not because, you know, I like Bond, but I don't necessarily have enough, like, I don't model myself off after James Bond, clearly. I think the bottom line is that there's no brand that makes watches, like an array of watches, that I like as much as Omega. My favorite line is the Seamaster line. I own 3 Seamasters. I love the Planet Ocean, the Aquaterra, the Speedmaster, maybe a little bit less than the dive watches. There are other Omegas I'd really like to own someday. For instance, I would love to own the vintage late 60s Seamaster 300. I would love to own I guess in a way my ultimate grail, not necessarily ultimate grail, but one of my very favorite pieces is the blue liquid metal Planet Ocean chronograph. It's a big watch, but it's titanium, so it makes it a little bit more wearable. But yeah, so that's Omega. Omega's my favorite overall brand. So let's take a look at some pictures. Okay, so there you go. There you have it. My top 5 brands in reverse order. Number 5, the Oris. Number 4, Citizen. Number 3, Seiko. Number 2, Breitling. And number 1, Omega. I wanted to just put in a couple honorable mentions out there. I wouldn't really, you know, these would probably be contenders for the top 10, or they'd be, if I was including the really high-end brands, I would include these in the mix somewhere. But Orient's my third favorite of the three big Japanese brands, and in a way, Orient, it's close. It's close to Citizen and even Seiko. They make a lot of really nice watches, but they just don't have the line that Citizen or Seiko has. And then as far as horology brands, there's two, actually maybe three that I would mention. One is Blancpain. I'm not crazy about all of theirs, but they have this one watch, the Villeret, this blue dial one. I'll show you a picture in a moment. That is just gorgeous, and it's definitely a long-term future possibility. Also, Breguet. Breguet is another one of my favorite of all the high-end brands. Breguet makes some really nice pieces. I think I've mentioned that when I was in New York. Of those high-end watches, they were the one that most impressed me. Much more than Patek and Vacheron, Audemars, etc. And there's one more I'll mention. I'll put a picture of this at the very end. Roger Dubuis makes very, very high-end watches, and there's this one. There's the Excalibur line, which it's all very open-faced, skeletonized dials. But there's this one. I think it's called the Quatuor, or let me see if I have it. Where is it? I have a picture that I'm going to put up. Yeah, I don't remember. Quatuor or something like that. It's I didn't realize this when I came across it, but I think it's about $1 million. It's got 4 tourbillons that are kind of arranged. You can just look at it. It'll be the last picture that I'll put up on this video. It's unbelievable and it's gorgeous, and I just think it's really, really cool. Of course, all the other watches that I've mentioned are within reason, but I would never. I don't see a future where I could spend that kind of money on a watch. But it's worth mentioning as something that I really like from that really upper tier 7 watches. All right, so there you go. Let me know what you think. All right. And actually, feel free to put either your top 5s in the comments field or do a video if you are a fellow YouTuber. All right, talk to you later. Video. And I'll do this in segments, so I'll talk about each one in reverse order, and then I'll show you some pictures of some of my favorite watches. Not all of my favorites, but just some of my favorite watches among each brand. You'll notice, I'll say this preemptively, that there aren't any real have shared topics of conversation. It's kind of interesting when it brings a little bit more resonance to the different channels and it's like a conversation going. Oh, you hear that? Silence. No music for this one. Anyways, no reason for it. Just didn't put anything on. What I was going to do is a 5 favorite brand. All right, folks, I'm going to do a short little video here. Well, short-ish by my standards. Single-digit numbers. That I guess, I've been meaning to do this for a while, but Simon Crane did it a couple of weeks ago, and I thought I'd continue the conversation, so to speak, among... I like it when some of the watch pundits and YouTubers' preferences are more centered around tier 3 to 5. Meaning the video would be about how different tiers almost have different stylistic qualities. And for the most part, I'm not crazy about the styles, the look of tier 6 and 7 watches. There are some exceptions, of course. But it's just not... I like more of the diver sport look. And most of those are really high-end, very horology brands mentioned among the 5. I'll give an honorable mentions at the end, which will include some of the higher end brands. But I feel like I don't own any tier 6 or higher watches. There are some brands I really like, but for the most part, I might do a video on this at some point, but for the most part, I think that my stylist